Well, 2020 is quite a year, isn't it? Not only are we in the middle of a pandemic and dealing with, at least in my lifetime, sort of an unprecedented political season, but now we have a hurricane that is out in the Atlantic, and we may get some rain from that, but I think we'll be okay. But it is a crazy year, is it not? And it sort of has us scratching our head thinking like, all right, like, what do I do? How do I get through this? What is God trying to tell us? And how are we going to just get through this? And I think maybe more than ever, we have to remember why we exist. I mean, that's a very big question. Okay, why do we exist? And we're starting a new series today, but before I get to that series, I sort of want to have a state of the union, if you will, about just where we are and how to approach all of this. And so we exist for who? For God, for King Jesus. He is the reason that we exist, not for ourselves, not for our own motives, not for anyone else, but for God. And He has given us how many missions? One. And that mission is relational discipleship, is how we put it. Make disciples of all nations. If we want to put it another way, it's to change lives with Jesus-centered relationships. And so we see how Jesus did this. He had a mission to make disciples, and we even see how He did it. He spent time with these few amount of people, and His relationship with them ended up kind of spilling over and changing the world. And so with this mission, then we enter this season. So how in the world do we go about relational discipleship in a time when relationships are pretty hard to navigate? How in the world do we share the message of Jesus when it seems like we can't be around some of our friends, we can't be around maybe even some of our family, we can't maybe go out and share the gospel like we would have before? I mean, it's an unprecedented time. And I think we need to figure out and really ask this one question: what is happening spiritually? Like, we know what is happening physically. We know what's happening health-wise. We know what's happening politically. But there's not a lot of discussions about what this is going to do to us in a spiritual way. And so I think we need to ask that question. And if Satan had one goal during this time, it would be to put out our spiritual passion, to put out our spiritual fire, to put out the spiritual fire that is going on within the church. And how do you do that? How do you do that? If you were systematically trying to dismantle the church and put out the passion and the love for God, how would you do that? Well, how do you put out a fire? There's a few different ways to do that. You can sort of throw water on a fire. That's one way. Another way to do that is to actually separate the coals. You get in a fire, you grab your tongs, and you get the biggest coals all the way down at the foundation of the fire, and you pull them apart one by one. And if you pull all of those coals apart, what happens to the fire? It begins to diminish because it's not with the other coals. And if you have two coals together, what happens is the heat from those two coals actually kind of reflect each other and magnify each other. And this is how you end up with a flame. And so if you get 4 or 5 or 6 coals together, man, you can get a good flame going. But if you have one coal separated from everything else, then what begins to happen? It begins to go out. It begins to get cold. It begins to be sort of stagnant, really not useful at all. And I would just say that during this time, we need spiritual family. During this time, we need spiritual family. And I've talked to some of you, and we have some new Christians here at San Jose, and they are admitting this is really hard for us right now. Because we just come to Christ, and then now we're sort of separated from the body of believers, and it's a struggle to continue to grow when it feels like we're all on our own. And you talk to some people who, some of us are steady and just easy. We kind of navigate through life very smooth. Some of us, we have highs and lows, right? And sometimes they're emotional highs and lows. Sometimes they're spiritual highs and lows. And some are sort of coming and they're saying like, okay, I'm really in a spiritual low point right now. And normally when I'm at a spiritual low point, I have my spiritual family to go to and to say, I need encouragement, I need support, this is what I'm going through. But now I just feel like I'm all alone. And so I think our focus has been distracted away from the mission of making disciples. We're not really sure all of how to do that. And then we feel maybe more alone than we've ever felt before because our community has been kind of divided and set apart from one another. And so I think this time in particular is a good time to talk about the subject of one another. I know this may sound strange. You're like, wait, one another? Like we can't see one another. But what do we need most of all right now? One another. There are all of these verses in the Bible that talk about one another, about loving one another, about encouraging one another, about, sharpening one another, honoring one another, respecting one another. All of these verses, these one another passages. And so for the next few weeks, we want to talk about these one another passages and how in this craziness we can still be one another and to be the church on a mission that God wants us to be. And so we want to look at this passage. I appreciate Bob reading this. I'm going to look at it one more time. And sorry, it wasn't Bob who read it. I can't remember now. So, but it says John 13:34 through 35. It says, "A new command I give you. Love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." So from the very beginning here, he says, "A new command I give you." This is a new command. Now, this is weird to me. Jesus has been with them for a little while. He's sort of getting to the end of his life. And then he's like, okay, guys, I've given you lots of other commands, but this one is a new command. And I think, wow, this is strange that after all of this time that Jesus has had with his disciples, then why is this a new command? I don't think the love one another part is a new command. I think the degree of love that he was asking for them was different. Because only now, towards the end of his life, could he say, I want you to love one another as I have loved you. And I think they're probably thinking, whoa. That is a different kind of love. It's a different level of love. I don't know if I can do that, Jesus, because you have been with us, you've sharpened us, you've mentored us, you've honored us, you've encouraged us, you've challenged us, and you've done all of these things to make us into be more like you. But I don't know, this is what I would be thinking, I don't know if I have that level of love. And he says, let me tell you what the stakes are. The stakes are that the whole world will know who I am if you can show one another this kind of love. And if you can't, then maybe the world won't know about me. Maybe the world won't know that you are my disciple if you do not know how to show this kind of love. And so what is Jesus saying here? Jesus wants us to be the most loving people anywhere. I mean, anywhere on planet Earth. We are to be the most loving people that you can find anywhere on planet Earth. And this is the mission. This is how he expects them to make disciples, is to be the most loving people anywhere. And so are you a loving person? Are we a loving church? And the answer to that is yes. We are a loving church. Now, are we perfect? No. Do we make mistakes? Yes. Do we fall short of the perfection of Jesus' love? Yes. But we get it right sometimes, don't we? At least sometimes we get it right. And I want to show you an example of one of the times in which you all have gotten it right. And this is one individual who has been at this congregation for a long, long time. and can tell the world about the love that you have shown to
Hello.
her.
For those of you who don't know me, I am Jennifer Hip, go by Jen. I'm one of the children's ministers here at San Jose Church of Christ. I've been a member of this church for 23 years, as crazy as that is. And I wanted to tell you about what the verse, love one another, means to me. So when I think of that verse, I think of a very specific time in my life where I was shown an outpouring of love from my church family. I was 20 years old, in college, and like many college students have done, that had grown up in church, had drifted away from God, drifted away from the church. I would still come occasionally, but even when I was here, I wasn't really here, if that makes sense to y'all. And at the age of 20, as a sophomore, I found out I was pregnant. And I was just filled with anxiety and so scared, and I didn't know where to turn or how to tell even my family, who I was so close to. So background of that is, as a girl growing up in the church, I would be what you called the self-proclaimed good girl. I never broke the rules. I always did what I was supposed to, always respectful of others. You can even ask my mom. This is all true. So I had that persona about me, and that was how I thought of myself. So when I found out I was pregnant, that thought of, what are people going to think of me? This is not who they think I am, started eating at me, and I just couldn't let go of it. And even for the first few months of my pregnancy, I didn't even tell my parents. My dad was battling cancer. My mom was the primary caretaker and was taking care of my younger siblings who were in high school and working. And it was just already a really crazy time for us, and I couldn't find the way to tell them. So finally, a few months into my pregnancy, believe it or not, it took that long, I mustered up the courage to tell them, and felt some relief with that, knowing that somebody else knew. It wasn't just me who knew this was going on. And soon thereafter, we decided that my church family needed to know. It was going to become obvious very soon, and it was just easier for the truth to come out all at once and for everyone to know. And I remember that Sunday morning very clearly in my head, as clear as I can. I remember we were sitting in one of the back pews, and I felt like I could be really hidden back there. And we sang the songs, we did the communion, the sermon was done, and then the invitation song came. I couldn't tell you today what that invitation song was, because I wasn't thinking about what the song was, what the words were. I was thinking about how hard my heart was beating, and that I was about to go forward and tell everybody that I had grown up with this news. And I remember thinking, this walk down this aisle is the longest walk of my life. And, thinking that people were looking at me, why is she going forward? Why is Jen going forward? That was the thought I had. That's probably not what they were thinking, but eventually I made it up to the front and handed the letter to an elder. They read it, and then they handed it to the preacher to read. And I remember sitting there and focusing just on him reading the letter. And the letter basically said, I'm pregnant. I need you. I need God as I walk this new path of life as a mom. And I need you as a church, to help be that village, to help raise her in the church, and to know the unrelenting love of God. I want y'all to be here for me. And as the letter was being read, I remember the pews surrounding me, those people started to lay their hands on my shoulders. And I remember that weight that I had started being lifted a little bit. I could feel that there was love there, and there was people that were, tuning into that story and knowing they're going to be here for me. And as the letter was being wrapped up, and other people started coming forward and hugging me, and they were kneeling, right at our feet, and he prayed over us, and I just remember the tears rolling down my face, and being really struck by the fact that this sin that I had, that I had done, and then now this outpouring of love, like it was so much more than that sin, and it was so powerful. It was like at that moment I knew that's what the love one another kind of love God was talking about. It's that unconditional, unrelenting, always there, forgiving, full of grace kind of love. They didn't care what I had done. They just wanted to be there for me, show me their support, and be there for my daughter Kaylee. And it didn't just stop there. That's something else that I think is so important to this story. It wasn't just all right, she's come forward, let's be there for her. It continued on. Her baby shower, I was overwhelmed by the amount of people that showed up to that house that day. It was very humbling. It was also at that moment I realized that they love me and they're going to be here for me no matter what. I couldn't believe how many people were there. And as the years have passed, we've gone through lots of tragedies. My dad passed away 3 months after my beautiful daughter Kaylee was born, and they were there for us when that happened. And they have watched me grow and meet my husband, and watched him adopt my daughter Kaylee, and watch us become this beautiful family that we've become. And we've added another baby into our family. And so they've watched all this beauty happen and always been there no matter what was happening. And the last thing I want to leave you with is the fact that loving one another like this and showing other people that love, it is infectious. Because when I felt that love and I knew that love, I wanted to spread it to others. And I can only hope that other people have seen that and felt that from me, because I want that to be my life's mission, to love people unrelentingly, unconditionally, and just listen to their story and be there for them and show them what that love one another kind of love is that God was speaking to us about.
So first of all, I want to say, wow, Jen has a lot of courage to come down and to do that as a 20-year-old. I can't imagine what she was feeling. Knowing her, she doesn't like to be the center of attention anyway, and so I'm sure her heart was just going, wow, thank you, Jen, for sharing that story with us today. And thank you, church, for being a loving family, to show that kind of love to someone who felt so alone and so isolated and so just worried about what other people were thinking. The thing that she needed the most was those hands of love on her and those people showing up for her and showing that kind of love throughout this incredibly difficult time of her life. And she's right. This is the kind of forever, never giving up, never ending, unrelenting love of God that he shows to us. And so when Jesus says this, when he says, I want you to show the same love that I gave to you to others, you did that for Jen. You showed this never ending, never giving up kind of love to her. And this is the church that we want to be, especially to those who feel so alone and without God. They need to see this kind of love. Jesus wants us to be the most loving people anywhere. And we don't always get it right. But the moments that we do, aren't those incredible moments to see how God shows up in us and shows up around us? So who wants more love in the world? Who would raise their hand to that question? Who wants more love in the world? Yeah, everyone. If your hand wasn't up, or at least mentally up, then you're crazy. All right. Everyone wants more love in the world. And so we've got to figure out how to show more love in the world. So if you ask that question to everyone in the world, who would say, yes, I want more love in the world? I think everyone would say that. So why isn't there more love in the world? Why isn't there this kind of love in the world? Well, the reality is that there are some barriers to love that we don't always see. There are things that erode our love that we don't always notice. And so sometimes what we need to do is to pay attention to the love and the things that erode our love that we can do to improve the love that we have for others. And so the barriers to love that I see, at least during this time, this slice of life that we're in right now, is inconvenience. And I know some of these just because I feel them personally. We are so busy, aren't we? We're going from place to place. We're going from person to person, from task to task. And sometimes we see people that need our help. Sometimes we notice people that feel alone. We see someone on the side of the road, or we notice someone who's lost their job, or we think to ourselves, I need to write a thank you card to that person, or I need to write an encouraging note to someone else. And why don't we do it? Is it because we have evil in our heart? No. It's because we're busy. And sometimes the inconvenience of showing love, which love is often inconvenient, gets in the way of us showing the love that Jesus showed to us. I think the love that he showed for us wasn't exactly convenient either, but he showed it anyway. I think pride is another barrier to love and wanting to be right. Do you know anyone who wants to be right? Do you ever want to be right? Do you ever want to be right more than you want to show love? Yeah. In fact, if you just replaced all of the people in the world trying to be right now with people who are showing love right now, what kind of world would we have? What kind of world would we have? Rather than seeing people on Facebook or social media talking about masks and whether that's right or wrong, we would have people showing love. Rather than people talking about political things and which side was right or wrong, we would have people showing love. Rather than people being so eager to prove their point, if everyone in the world just showed love to one another, what kind of world would we have? But the reality is that we have pride in our hearts. We want to be right. We want to show the world, I have value because I'm right. What Jesus says is, no, that's not how the world's going to know what kind of disciple you are. That's not how the world is going to know that you belong to me. That's not how we change the world for King Jesus. We change the world for Jesus by showing love, not by being right. So we've got some work to do on our hearts, especially on our pride. I think we also have this barrier of self-focus. And again, I know these because I'm guilty of them. Sometimes we can be self-focused. We can be worried about what we're going to do, how we're gonna survive, how we're gonna make it through this season or that season, or how we're gonna just fill in the blank. And we become so self-focused, so laser-focused on our lives, that what you feel is you begin to be apathetic about anyone else's life. Have you experienced this? I mean, so wrapped up in your own problems, your own issues, your own solutions, that you forget other people have things much more difficult than you do. They are struggling with things that are bigger than you do. And so we become apathetic as we become self-focused. It's a huge barrier to love. And the last one here is just this pain and hurt that sometimes we have. We see this happen in a lot of different instances. Some people will say, well, I'm not going to reach out to so-and-so because they never reached out to me. What is that? That's pain and hurt. That's saying, I am so hurt that I'm not going to show love. I'm so in pain that I can't show love to other people. It doesn't matter if they don't feel love. I'm hurt. I want everyone to know I'm hurt, and so I'm going to limit the love that I show in the world. And so we've got this barriers to love that we see. And I want us to know we are so focused sometimes on hate. Well, I don't hate anyone. Isn't that love? I don't think the opposite of love is hate. I think the opposite love is anything that limits your expression of love. And so apathy is the opposite of love. Pride can be the opposite of love. The self-focus can be the opposite of love. There are so many things that limit our love that actually become the opposite of love. And when we read in 1 Corinthians, this famous chapter on love, we see it. Let's read it. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. So I want us to notice something here. What part of the verse, what portion of the verse talks about what love is, and what portion of the verse talks about what love isn't? Love is patient. Love is kind. This is how you know you're being loving. And then he lists all of these examples of what love isn't. Why? Because we all want love. We all want to show love. We all want more love in the world, and so that's not the problem. It's not a desire problem. It's not a, knowing what love is problem. It's these things erode our love. And we have to overcome those things in order to show more love. And so he says, if you're envying, that's taking away your love. If you're boasting, that's taking away your love. If you're proud, that's taking away your love. If you're dishonoring others, if you're being self-seeking, if you're angry, if you're keeping score about who is right more times, that is stripping away the love that I want you to show to everyone else. You see that? And so how do we grow our love? Give love room to grow. If the reason we don't have more love in the world is because things are getting in and stripping us of the love we need to show, we just need to give love more room to grow. We need to sort of hack the hedges away, to remove the weeds, the things that are growing into our love. And when we do that, we'll have more love to give. When we're able to say no pride, no apathy, no self-focus, no pain and hurt, I will not let you affect the love that I need to show to others, then we'll have more love to give. And so when we look at these, we've got to do the work to overcome these. Now, how do we do this? What can we do this week? What can you do this week to allow your love room to grow? Now, maybe you have the answer to that. Maybe you're thinking, okay, I'm going to do 1, 2, and 3, and I've got it all set. You planners out there are like, you already got your planner out, filling in the details. But if you don't know quite what that looks like, I want to give you 2 things that we can do during this season to become people that are about one another and people that show love to one another. And the first one is this. We partner with a group called Young Lives. And Jen told her story earlier today just about being a almost teen mom. And Young Lives is an organization that supports teen moms. And so one of the things that we've done is we've partnered with them to say, okay, we know that these young ladies feel alone, they feel isolated, they feel like they don't have spiritual family or sometimes family at all. And so we want to do what we can to show love to them. And so I talked to the director of Young Lives this week, and what we came up with is 3 things that we can help, or 3 ways. Number 1 is cards. We're going to talk about gift cards in a second. But I want to get to cards first, because if they feel alone, writing a card to tell them a story about what you've been through, a time when you struggled, to give them encouraging words, to give them Bible verses, to give them anything that will tell them I'm not alone in this world, would be an awesome card to write. Secondly, gift cards. Walmart gift cards are the best thing for them. Many of these young ladies have lost their jobs due to COVID. And they were working on the front lines in fast food restaurants and just retail jobs, and so now they do not have an income. And with young babies, this is very difficult. And so what a better opportunity we would have in order to show love by sending gift cards. And the last thing is, if you're someone at home who's watching on the live stream saying, I'm not getting out at all, I'm going to send out a link today to a Amazon registry. I think that's what we call it. And in a few clicks, you'll be able to send a gift to their door, to Young Lives headquarters, and sort of get these gift packages to them. Now, if you're going to do that, and that's great, but write a card also. because our mission is to share our relationship with them in the love of Christ. So that's one thing that we can do. And so I'll send that link out today. You can just drop the gift cards off in the office. You can mail them to us. We'll make sure they get to Young Lives. The second thing that I want to talk about is something that you may not have thought of in a while, and that's life group. Now, during this season, I know that everyone has different levels of comfort being out, and I don't want to step on those. I don't want to push people to do something they're not comfortable with. But some of you watching at home might not be comfortable in this environment, but you would be comfortable going to a life group. You would be comfortable maybe watching service or having a devotional with a small group and sort of, risking that. And I would just say that we may be in this season for a long time. We don't know. It could be 30 more days. It could be another year that we're wrestling with this season. And what I want us to think about is, okay, if we are people made by God, who live for God, to support the mission of God, then no matter what season we're in, we have to find a way to make disciples with our relationships. And life group is a great way to do that. It's a great way to sharpen one another. We need spiritual family more than ever. And if we can invite people to those groups and continue to be spiritual family to one another and show love for one another, then the world's going to see the kind of love that we have for one another and the love that we have for them. So I'll say this, send me an email. If you're interested in a life group, if you're interested even in hosting a life group, if you just want to be a part of one and you're in desperate need of spiritual family, send me an email. It's on the screen. And we will find a spot for you to be able to connect. It may be virtual, it may be in a home, it may be a hybrid of both, but we need to find ways to be with one another. Unfortunately, I think we were about to launch double the amount of life groups than we had the previous year, which if you know, the previous year we doubled from that to be what we had this year. And so COVID has sort of disrupted the plans that we had, but it has not disrupted our focus on the mission of God, to show love to all people who need to see who God really is. And so the question is, what will you do to show love? Will you give love room to grow? When we look at the love of Jesus and really analyze the quality of his love, was he ever too busy for someone? We see him walk by and he stops to heal those who are sick and to be with those who are alone. Was he ever too prideful? Did he know when to show love and when to be right? Yeah. I think about the woman caught in adultery, and he shows love to her when everyone else is just trying to be right. Was he self-focused? And I've read them through a few, probably 100 times, and I can't see even a second, even a moment of self-focus in Jesus' life. And did he let the pain of the cross diminish his love? No. He expressed his love through the pain of the cross. So overcome the barriers to love. Overcome the obstacles. Give love room to grow. And San Jose, this week and for the rest of your years, love one another.